All right, hi folks. We are going to get started. So welcome to the first of the Summer Prevention Webinar Series here from WCASA. My name is Jesse Corcoran. I'm the Prevention Coordinator here at WCASA. And I wanted to really quickly give you some information about this series, some background information. We originally started this just last year. This is our second year in a row doing this webinar series. And we specifically continue to organize this in the summertime because we know that that tends to be a little bit of a better time for a lot of prevention folks, since a lot of you are doing school-based education and work. But if you have any feedback regarding this series, please feel free to email me. My email address is right there. You can also contact Kelly, our Director of Prevention and Programs. Her email is also on that slide. In this series today, we're going to be talking about gender socialization and sexual violence. We have some really great presenters with us here today from Rape Crisis Center and the Personal Development Center. I look forward to hearing what they have to say about how they're integrating gender socialization into their prevention work. But in 2 weeks, we have the topic of integrating an anti-oppression approach into sexual violence prevention. So Priceless Insight of Milwaukee and Wise Women Gathering Place of Green Bay are going to be presenting that day. After that, on July 13th, we have Male Engagement and Allyship in Prevention. Voices of Men from the Fox Valley area, as well as their partners, SASPs and REACH, are going to be presenting on this topic. They've been doing some really interesting work regarding engaging men in the sexual violence prevention field and trying to do that in a really ethical way. And they'll talk a little bit about some of the missteps they have made over the years and how they've corrected those. And then finally, we have the topic of pornography, normalizing the relationship between violence and sex. So this is a PhD candidate, Amanda Morzek. She's going to be presenting this one. She's a PhD candidate at Washington State. She's done some research on this topic, so it'll be really, really interesting. Just so you all know, all of these webinars are 10 to 11:30 a.m., and they're all Thursdays. And they are all going to be recorded and archived onto our website, so you should be able to access them after the fact as well. Any resources or handouts or anything like that come up during the webinar today, we will make sure to get to all attendees after the fact. And finally, please use the questions/chat box. If you have any questions, please feel free to type those in there for the presenters. We will, as the facilitators, we'll sort of find a good pausing time whenever the presenter has a moment, and we'll make sure to get that question asked of the presenter. So if there are any questions, if you're having any technology issues, please also use that chat/questions box. And the organizers will be able to see that, and we'll be able to help you address those issues as well. And if there are no questions right now, I really quickly want to go over social norms and sort of why we're talking about gender socialization today. So WCASA has been focusing on these 4 social norms: the normalization of violence, unhealthy sexuality, objectification and sexualization, and gender socialization. These 4 social norms that we have chosen to focus on are based in research, and this year we are focusing on gender socialization. So under each one of these social norms, we talk about 4 different risk factors that go along with them. You can sort of read those yourselves, but as you notice, and especially back on that image, we also are talking about systems of oppression as we're talking about these social norms. So it's really important to us to make sure that we're talking about how systems of oppression both create some of these social norms, but they also interplay with the social norms in a kind of interesting way. So for example, I think women of color or Black women especially experience interesting things surrounding objectification and sexualization, for example. So a lot of Black women have shared their stories about being objectified not only because they're a woman, but also because they're Black and because of their race and because of the stereotypes and assumptions that are made based on that. So again, making sure that we're talking about those systems of oppression as we talk about these social norms. So I want to point out the social norms toolkits that WCASA has. And they're available on our prevention page. If you go to wcasa.org and click on prevention and scroll down a little bit, you'll find all of the social norms toolkits. So we have a toolkit for each one of the 4 social norms. And I just want to walk you through really quickly, just so you know what it looks like to take a look at these toolkits. First, as you scroll through it, I had to break this up into different slides so it would fit, but as you scroll through it, we start with what is it? What is this social norm? And this example is the Gender Socialization Toolkit, but it kind of breaks it down and says, this is what gender socialization means. This is what we mean by that. And then again, as we're trying to keep in mind systems of oppression, we want to make sure we think about how these social norms might impact some marginalized communities more than others, or in different ways. And so in this particular toolkit, we really focus, we put some focus on the interesting impacts that this may have for the LGBTQ community specifically. And then we actually get into, okay, how does this social norm lead to sexual assault? What is the connection there? And we have had some feedback from folks that they've really appreciated this section in the Social Norms Toolkits because it uses some research to sort of explain, what that connection is. And then later, when they're getting questions about why are you focusing on, how women are treated when we're talking about sexual assault or things like that, and we can, they can come back to these toolkits and say, here's some information about that. This is why we're focusing on this. This is why this prevents sexual assault. And then at the very bottom, we have a bunch of resources. So again, as you're scrolling through the toolkit, you can click on these. These are all linked. And you can find activities and lesson plans and videos and things like that that may be able to help you address these topics within your own prevention work. So that's all I have on those. I just wanted to give you that brief overview, let you know that those resources were available. And without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Sarah Flynn and allow her to introduce herself. So, Peter, if you could turn it over to her.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to introduce myself really briefly. My name is Sarah Flynn. I work for the Personal Development Center located in Marshfield, Wisconsin. Our center has a sister center in Clark County. We are not a shelter-based agency, but we work with people from all ages, youth to adults. We work with sexual assault victims. We work with domestic violence victims. We also have a Center for Family and Visitation for safe exchanges and for visitation purposes to allow those relationships to grow and to support those relationships in those families that are dealing with whatever situation. So I am the youth advocate here / education specialist. The program that I'm going to be kind of specifically talking about, focusing on gender socialization, we took the idea from the WCASA webpage for the social norms that we just overviewed, and we kind of implemented that into the program. What it is it is a half-day program that we designed for seniors at the high school. It's their half day right after third quarter, right before prom. So we used this gender socialization based idea and implemented it into the half day program. And what I'm going to be overviewing today is what we looked at with the third section of that program, where we're looking at activities and scenarios and applying it to get seniors, to get the class to apply it to their daily lives, to problem solve, to figure out how to kind of not be marginalized, not to have that construed thinking, and to see outside of the box, so to speak. So we just overviewed kind of a little bit of what gender socialization is and how we talk about it with the students as, what's gender versus sex, what's male versus female, what are society's expectations to fit you into these boxes of male versus female, things based on like toys, the colors of toys, clothing, how you're dressed. We are exposed from a very early age of what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a man as far as fairy tales and nursery rhymes, movies. We also get these ideas of what relationships looks like based on what our friends are doing, maybe what our influences were with people that we know, our friends, our close relationships that we have in our own lives. So the Safety After High School program is what we call it. and it's based right in the high school just for seniors. And by the time they have it, I would say 2/3 of the class is 18 years old. This program was also not only inspired by WCASA's social norms, but also it was inspired by the Enhanced Access and Knowledge Act Sexual Assault Resistance Program, the EAAA. It's a 12-hour program broken into 4 sections, which are 3 hours long each. It was written by Charlene Sen, a Canadian psychologist, and the Florida Atlantic University uses this program in their university, and I call it the Flip the Script program. So this is where this was taken, and we took this 12-hour program and condensed it to a 3-hour, almost 3.5-hour long session for a half-day program for the seniors. So what this looks like is that the first section of the day, logistically speaking, because of space, because of the setup of the high school, we had to split it up male and female. So as interesting as that is with gender socialization, it just made sense. It was the easiest logistical thing to do. They got the same exact presentation. They were just separated into different areas. Then they broke up into what we would call workshops. The boys automatically, right after their presentation, went to a self-defense piece where they were with martial arts instructors and they were learning jiu-jitsu. They worked on small wrist techniques, role reversal situations, and the girls, right after their presentation, went to small groups activities, which is where we have the application piece. We looked at scenarios, activities, problem-solving situations, power and control identification. So this was also, we wanted to make sure that the 3 main topics of the EAAA was acknowledged. So enhanced access, acknowledge, and act program of what Dr. Sen had originally came up with in her curriculum. And then after they do those sections, they switch. The small groups section, they are divided into 5 rooms. That's just how it worked for Marshfield High School. We had 5 Personal Development Center staff present, and we were joined with either school staff that were support, school counselors, and or law enforcement to also be present to answer any legal questions, especially when it came to consent or sexual assault and consequences and what the law says, what the legal aspect of that is. So there was a lot going on during the day, but what I'm going to be talking about going into gender socialization is the small groups piece that we introduced to the seniors. So how we started off is basically we get them thinking, what does society say it means to be a man? What does it mean to be a man? And what are some anti-masculine characteristics? What types of jobs do men have? So in the small group section, everybody that's involved, you know, they're shouting out answers. We kind of have an open discussion of what that means, some societal pressures of what it means to be a man. I have them watch the YouTube video, which is, the link is listed on the bottom of the slide, and Peter had sent people the link to watch ahead of time. And if you did not, please take the time to write that down and on your own time to watch that, because that's what the seniors were looking at. It definitely talks about, you know, typical words or language that men hear, young boys hear of what it means to be a man. Then after that happens, we break it down and we have the kids talking about what it means to be a lady in society. What are some anti-feminine characteristics? What typical jobs do women have? And we get them brainstorming and shouting out answers. And then I show them the YouTube video, which is the link listed on the bottom of the screen. So you can take a few minutes and write that down as well. I'll go back so that you can write the other one as well. So during this section, after they watch these trailers to Misrepresentation and the Mask You Live In, we talk about how when you're putting men and women into these boxes and then you're adding into the idea of these anti-masculine, anti-feminine characteristics, and now you're talking about transgender individuals, how fitting into those boxes doesn't always work, and how violence escalates, and how violence in relationships and dating relationships and intimate partner relationships escalates when there's these pressures in society are happening on individuals. So we give them a few minutes to kind of think about that, to ask questions. I'll go to the next slide so that whoever needs to write down the link, they have some time to do so. Oops. Sorry. So this was really great to get some discussion going. Some rooms, when we divided it into 5 rooms, some presenters were able to get more discussions going. Again, it kind of depends on, the personalities in the room, who is willing to say things, those sorts of things. I mean, it's not foolproof, but it was definitely interesting to come back and compare with Personal Development Center staff. I thought that this was a great way to kind of take everything that they learned in the first half of the day and see what they could apply to this section of the day. So then I just want to throw it back to the audience and ask if anybody has any questions or thoughts based on this part of it so far.
And while we wait for folks to share any thoughts or comments or questions, as they're typing maybe some of those, just so folks know, I did copy and paste both of the links to the trailers for the Mask You Live In and Misrepresentation into the chat box. So you should be able to click it from there or copy and paste it for later use as well. So, any other thoughts or questions from folks? I'm not seeing, oh, we found something. Okay. We have a question. One of them said, or an attendee said, maybe I missed this, but would or do you accommodate non-binary students in the gender-separated activity?
They're all included. And we don't really have any identified this past year. We do know the next coming year we have individuals that are identifying as agender or transgender, so we're going to have to do some logistical moving around, and that's perfectly fine. How they separated the kids into the rooms is it was on a randomizer through the computer system through the school, and about a week to 2 weeks ahead of this half-day program, it was listed. So you could go to a list and see where your name was, and if there was any personality conflicts or if a person didn't feel like they were comfortable in that specific room, they had the opportunity to change that and to approach a school counselor to get that changed.
Okay, so you didn't separate boy and girl, is that what you're saying? Just to clarify.
The first section of the day, we did separate it out boy and girl. And this past year, we didn't have anybody who wasn't okay with that idea. And we knew going in, because of the program that we do in the fall for teen dating violence specifically, that we didn't have anybody identifying as transgender or agender or any of those situations. So we knew that ahead of time. But then after that, they were kind of mixed, like with martial arts, and then they switched with the small group activities. So it was divided male, female, but in the specific rooms there was the presenters, and they could have been with school staff and or law enforcement. So there was a mix of genders within the room, I guess, if that clears that up.
Yeah, sure. And then another person said a comment, both documentaries are available on Netflix. We had another question that seemed a little bit similar. Another person asked, did you allow kids to self-select whether they were boys or girls? But I think maybe you answered that.
Yeah.
All right, great, awesome. Any other questions? It doesn't look like we have any, so maybe you can move right along, Sarah.
So these are direct slides that I took from the presentation for the seniors. And this specific section of it, we're looking at things that we're desensitized to as far as clothing, bathing suits, Halloween costumes, the exploitation and sexualization, especially when you're looking at girls. So we had them kind of look at these images and open up a discussion as to why you think these are occurring in society. So the first one would be like the Cookie Monster costume. A very appropriate boys' Halloween costume for Cookie Monster, but the girl's costume is very sexualized. Same thing with like bathing suits. You know, a little girl who's in a bikini, but we buy bikinis all the time. We don't even really think about it. But when you're putting a bikini on a young girl, you know, you're sexualizing her. She is not, you know, she hasn't hit puberty yet. This particular girl is probably about the age of 5. Then when you're looking at like beauty pageants and ballet and anywhere where they have to do a recital or a performance or anything like that. We're really sexualizing and beautifying young girls at higher rates, obviously, than boys. The two young individuals on the left part of the screen are what I could find for how we're putting this gender socialization, this feminine and masculine expectation on young kids. The little boy's outfit, heartthrob in training. So we're already expecting young boys to have this image that like he's going to be a heartbreaker, he's going to break young girls' hearts. You know, we saw some boys, you know, they get their hair styled and stuff, but not much. And you'll notice a difference when you're shopping for boys. Usually it's T-shirts and jeans and shoes. When you're talking about girls, however, you're talking about all of the accessories. You're talking about all of the things that are going to make her cute. And this outfit that the little girl's wearing and the yellow outfit is something that I would think a lot of people would say, oh my gosh, that's so cute. I would buy that for my own daughter. But when you break it down and you start seeing her hair is really done, she has these tiny little flat high heels, the purse, obviously, the shirt, you know, in parts it's lacy and see-through. And then you add the belt around the waist, which is emphasizing this hourglass figure. And this little girl is probably about 3 years old, I would say. So this idea of sexualizing young girls is happening at a very young age. We also look at advertising, so sexualization in advertisements, and looking at the limited concepts of health and sexuality, which we took from WCASA. And these are just some examples of some ads that you might be exposed to or that you might see. So like the Relish ad for clothing, you know, the men that are in the advertisement, they're in uniforms. They're very superior compared to the women who are inferior. The stance, how they have them standing, and they're advertising clothing. The man in the back close to the car, his hands up the girl's skirt. So we're just kind of breaking down what these images are saying and what this is, you know, desensitizing you to, marginalizing you to think about the norms of what it means to be a man and a woman. Same with like Carl's Jr. and Hardee's commercials. So, you know, eating this burger, some of the logos or the language that's used in advertising, she'll tell you size doesn't matter. She's lying. Usually the girls are seen in provocative clothing or in a provocative stance, or the way that they're postured, how they're eating the food. You know, we often see that. So the ad in the store, I think this is from Gap on the lower left, the boyfriend jeans for toddler girls. So attaching the word boyfriend to a jean targeted to be sold to toddler girls. You know, why are we attaching a boyfriend type term to a toddler girl? You know, you don't see the same thing in boys. We don't see a girlfriend jean for boys. So when we start looking at clothing, just these gendered language ads and ideas that we're associating with clothing and what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman early on in development is occurring just as much as it is in ads for adults. The man on the lower right, you know, he's on top of a dining room table about to eat a salad with his abs exposed. You know, it's very sexualized. It's very, if you eat this, you can look like me. This is sexy. Women want this. Men want to be this idea. And then we look at a few more ads. So a lot of men, so specifically, so Dial for Men, turn a no into a definite maybe, very sexualizing and very gender specific. We're just as excited to see you. The next ad, this is a Volvo advertisement. The parking brakes up to amplify or to expand on the idea of a male erection. The axe effect, so using this will, you know, the girls will come running. With forbidden fruits, turn nice girls naughty. So we kind of break this down, and I asked, you know, who in this room is using Dial soap, or who in this room is using Axe? And they were very kind of skittish to raise their hands, but it was really interesting to see how they were taking this in, and they were starting to see how much they're exposed to just with advertisements and the products that they buy. And some of the products that we broke down, we didn't have these slides specifically on the screen, but in my group I was talking about, like, you know, look at, for instance, Dove, men care versus the female Dove version. So the man's shampoo is in a very black and square product, whereas the females is very white and curvy. Q-tips, men's ultimate multi-tool, so specifically identifying Q-tips as being a man. This specific one is advertising for men to use. The upper left, the only difference between the girls and boys scooters is the color, but the girls scooter is $49.99 and the boys scooter is $24.99. So it costs more for a girl to be active and being outside and using this product. Women's razors, the price difference and the color difference. Men's and women's jeans, you can see a price difference there as well. And then when you're looking at shaving cream and razors, there's a price difference. So talking about the price to be pink is kind of what we're looking at here. Any thoughts?
Sarah?
Yes.
Oh, yes, we do have a question, so thank you for asking. We had another person ask, they said that they have had pushback from administrators about showing images like these, I think especially from the slide right before the health supply, or like things like this, or maybe the other images as well. And have you encountered pushback like that, and if so, how have you navigated it?
So we did this half-day program in March, and we started planning for this with the school counselors and with the principal back in November. So it took a long time. I came in with my first, I guess, draft. They looked at it. We switched some things around. Every step of the way, I made sure that it was okay with the principal. I made sure that it was okay with the message. Some of the images that I was suggesting or showing as an option to use, they were a little bit more sexual even than what I was allowed to use. So just so that they could see a comparison. Like, I could show this, but I could also show this one. So having that option and giving options for the school to choose and kind of pick from was very helpful. We have an amazing relationship with the school, so I didn't have a whole lot of pushback at all. This has been probably 10 years in the making of trying to get this this relationship to get to where it is now, and I didn't have a lot of pushback from the principal at all. He was willing to okay everything. He just wanted to make sure that it was, we weren't offending people, but he wanted the message. He thought the message was very important for kids to get. So that definitely helped with our school. In the school, I have hours at the school in the guidance office, the school counseling office, on 2 days a week during the school year. So my presence is in the schools. My presence is available for students, offering direct service in the schools. So I've already had that relationship with the schools. This was the second year that PDC has done this half-day program with the school. I made some changes for it this year, and these changes are what I'm pretty much showing you right now. Any other questions?
I don't see anything else popping up right now, but that was a really great question, especially considering, for example, I don't know if folks heard, but recently in Mount Horeb, a teacher was suspended, I think is the official term. They were suspended for actually showing misrepresentation as a film to discuss how women are portrayed in the media. And some folks thought that those images were inappropriate, but I think that oftentimes the pushback that we can give to that and is kind of that, well, your kids are seeing this anyway, are they not? This stuff is everywhere. This is already on TV. This is already in movies. This is already on billboards that they're seeing. We're just teaching them to think critically about it. So really awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And that person who asked that question responded, it sounds like you have a really awesome process. Thanks for sharing about that. So thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, and to kind of build on that, we also, months ahead of time, the school is letting parents know that this half-day program is happening. So it's not coming out of, a surprise situation. They're told through newsletters, they're told through the website, email. They do a monthly newsletter every year, prepping for end of third quarter, at that end of the semesters, I guess. They send out more information, parent-teacher conferences stuff. They're constantly reminding, and they're doing a great, wonderful job of giving the option to opt out of this. We didn't have anybody opt out of this half day, and 2/3 of the student body were seniors. They were 18 years old. So we didn't have a whole lot of problems getting this to get into the schools and to get this message to the students. So the other thing that we did in this scenarios and activities section is this activity that I have here. It's the sexual assault and relationships violence scenarios activity. So basically, the kids are given these scenarios. They count off by groups of 8. The students find other students with that number. They are given the scenario, and together they read it. They answer any questions on it. Afterwards, one person per group will read to the rest of the group what the scenario was and what they decided to do. They identify any gender socialization aspects of the scenario and or any power and control dynamics that they see in the situation. This was interesting because, again, when we consider the separating it into 5 rooms, some of the presenters were able to get really in depth into this scenario activity, and some of them they just kind of touched on it because they kind of read the room to see if we need to go through every, all 8 scenarios or not, and then we can move on to the next activity. Can we do this in 1 or 2 or 3 and move on from that? So the presenters were able to read the room to see where we're at, to see how the discussions are organically flowing, and to kind of go from there. And I have wonderful staff here who were able to determine that within their rooms. So one of the examples from this scenario activity is this specific one. So I picked one for this presentation because it seems pretty typical. It seems like something people would encounter, whether you're going off to college or you're going off to the workforce or you're in the military of some kind and you're socializing with people and you're at a party. So, Sally's at a party and one of the guys she has a crush on, they're having a great time. They're sitting on the couch. He asks her to go upstairs. She follows. She's excited to go up there. He takes her into a room. He closes the door. After a chat on the bed, they begin to kiss. Sally is excited. However, it quickly leads to more. He begins touching her in places she doesn't want to. She tries to say no, but he continues, and at the end of the night, Sally feels gross. These questions were with the scenario, but for each scenario, the students were asked to identify any gender socialization dynamics that they saw or any power and control dynamics, and answer the questions and share how they would help Sally, basically, when she shares the story. How would you respond, and what are resources you would direct her to? So this is just one example. Any questions on that? No? Okay.
Anything right now, but I'll let you know.
Okay. So then there's the what's worse activity. So I took items or situations onto pieces of paper. This is just an example. This wasn't a picture from that day. I just kind of put it up on my wall and took a picture just to show you the example of what we did. But there's items or situations on pieces of paper. Students were given Post-it notes, and they were labeling them 1, 2, and 3, and each student was given time to go to the papers and place which ones they felt were the top 3 worst items or situations given that were on the wall. So the ones I have here are spreads rumors to ruin your reputation, forced sex, you were touched inappropriately by a friend, and you were touched inappropriately by a stranger. And this visually gave the kids a visual to see, okay, a lot of people really thought forced sex or rape was #1, the absolute worst, but there were a couple 2s and 3s in there. So it got the kids to kind of see, oh, maybe somebody that I'm going to school with doesn't think that this is the absolute worst thing that could happen to them. And then if you look at the difference between you were touched inappropriately by a friend versus you were touched inappropriately by a stranger, some of the comments made, whether it was a female class or a male class, was pretty comical, actually. The one particular male that I had in my room during the male section, he was like, well, if my friend's touching me inappropriately, I'm just going to, tell him to knock it off, And a lot of people thought there was mixed feelings on being touched by a stranger. I brought up the idea of the spreads rumors to ruin your reputation one to both groups because I might be a person who, I hear this rumor going around, it doesn't affect me, it's no big deal, I know it's not true, I can move on with my life and ignore it. Or this could happen to me and this could devastate me and this could cause me some really horrible situations in school. It's ruining my reputation. This is so devastating to me. So having people realize that the same thing could happen to two people, and how they perceive that could be very different. So basically we're looking at the effects of trauma, the effects of violence, the effects of sexual assault, where the same thing could happen to two different people, but how they take it could be very different. So understanding the mental aspect of all of these situations and considering other people's perspectives if these things were happening to everybody. Any questions on that?
I don't see any right now.
This is the how would you say no activity. We put this slide directly into the PowerPoint with permission from the school. Basically, what would you do in these situations? How would you say no? What actions would you take? We tell the students not to hold back, to use language you would use, be realistic. You don't have to be politically correct or be scared of offending the school in these situations. If this was truly happening, you do everything you could do to stay safe. So we really gave the permission to the kids to not hold back on this. So then we went into the slides of how would you say no to these situations. So some of the common ones that we hear when we're looking at sexual assault, it's loud in here, let's go somewhere private. We had sex a few days ago, what's your problem? Are you really going to wear something super sexy to dinner and then not come back to my place? Or this situation where you've had a few drinks, your date buys another, you are already feeling tipsy. What would you do? How would you say no? Knowing it's prom, they wanted us to specifically ask, well, what if somebody says, hey, it's prom, it's expected? I think gender socialization, it's expected that a junior going off to prom is expected to lose her virginity on prom night. So having those discussions and opening that up to talk about that in the classroom setting was beneficial for some of the classrooms. Some of the classrooms got more in-depth in this than others. Another statement I know you want to, or another statement, is just sex, what's the big deal? So how would you respond? How would you say no? How would you get out of the situation? What would you do? By this point in time, kids were pretty engaged. Some of them were tired, depending on the time of day that they had this part of the workshop or this small groups activity. So the boys, they went from the large section to martial arts or jiu-jitsu and then the small groups. And the girls, they went from the girls' large section to the small groups and ended it with self-defense. So then to tie it all together, I show this pyramid, and I talk to them about how in society we're already desensitized and marginalized and used to the bottom two tiers. So the traditional gender roles, the glass ceiling idea, the rigid gender-based stereotypes, sexist comments, homophobic comments, transphobic comments and jokes, problematic language, objectification, sexualization, all of that. So we're already desensitized in everyday life and everyday culture around us, everything that we're exposed to on a daily basis. So then when you apply that to relationships is what I wanted them to understand, is if we're applying that to relationships and we're not saying things like, you know, don't call me that name, or I really am uncomfortable with you doing that, or I don't want you to say those things. You know, if you're not taking a stance when you're hearing that in your relationships, it's really easy for that to escalate very quickly to verbal abuse, harassment, and threats within the relationship, and then escalating into violence where you're looking at rape, sexual assault, physical, emotional, and financial abuse, and eventually murder, depending on the relationship, depending on that. So when they realize that the bottom two tiers we're already so desensitized to, and when you apply that to relationships, you're already on a projectile path of getting to abusive situations in your relationship. So to expand on gender socialization, when we're looking at the survey results on this, so at the end of it, everybody got the surveys, and I want to specifically identify some of the gender differences that I discovered. So for this day, we had 263 students in attendance. We received 220 surveys back. One of the questions on the survey asked, have you or someone you know ever been sexually assaulted? 57% of the girls said yes, and 33% of the boys said yes. So overall, 45% of 220 students said yes to that question. So then when we look at the top 5 answers on the opinion section of the question was, what was the most helpful part of the presentation? There was a difference based on gender between boys and girls of what they found was the most helpful. So boys, they were looking at all of it. They thought it was all great. They thought the scenarios, activities, and discussions were great. They appreciated the views about equality, gender roles, media, gender socialization discussions. They appreciated the real feedback from presenters talking about sex, the honesty, and a lot of them pointed out the men's mask video. The men's mask video is the link that I hyperlinked to the pyramid, which is on the bottom of the screen. You guys can take a few minutes to write that down, or if you want to view it on your own time, you can. So this is like the wrap-up video. It's a spoken word presented and done by a man that talks about taking your masks down and stepping up and looking at gender equality for the most part. So then when we look at females, the top 5 answers that they had given were, a lot of them said self-defense was the most helpful, or the jiu-jitsu aspect of the day, learning how to get out of a bad situation, what to do if they are assaulted, and how to say no. Everything, they thought it was awesome. The small groups activities, what's worse, and the presenters and talking with the presenters. So I thought this was interesting because if you're looking at gender socialization and you're looking at girls are already prepositioned or made to believe that they have to always do self-safety planning. So not walking alone at night, carrying your keys, having a cell phone, going to the bathroom in groups, not wearing something too sexy to a party. All of these things of safety planning as a girl. So they already have the problem solving down, the scenarios of how am I going to get out of this kind of in their head ingrained. So they really appreciated increasing their knowledge or increasing their skills of self-defense. Whereas the boys, they're already in society are made to believe or encouraged to be physical, to fight, to get out of a situation by using physical force or violence. So they didn't even mention that this was a helpful aspect hardly at all. I think there was like 10% of the boys even mentioned self-defense as being a helpful aspect of the whole day presentation. They more or less focused on understanding gender roles in the media, gender socialization, equality, talking about it, looking at scenarios, looking at activities, and getting that perspective from, including female perspective and female gender socialization in society and what that looks like when you're looking at sexual assault in relationships. So I thought that was super interesting when you're looking at gender socialization and what boys and girls, male, female, got out of this just based on the survey results. There was another opinion section on the survey where it asked what would you want changed about the presentation. This question there wasn't a whole lot of difference. I mean, it was just kind of depending on the overall idea. They thought it was well presented. They wanted it to be kept the same. They thought it was interesting to have the presenters present how they did. They wanted more activities. They wanted more time for small groups. They wanted more time to talk. They wanted a real survivor story and not the video that I had shown. They wanted to do more stuff like this. They wanted to have it for several days. They wanted less PowerPoint and more discussions. So overall, there wasn't a real difference there, but overall, this whole half-day program, they really took a lot away from it. Any questions?
Yeah, we do have a question. First of all, this person said, thanks for sharing. It's really helpful to hear activities. But they also asked, who is the author of the survey that you used, and is it validated or published?
No, we create them here. We have a couple of questions that United Way, where we have funding through United Way, that they want us to be asking on our survey, so we did ask those. But it's just our own developed survey. I have basically 5 questions for the main section of it, and then the 2 opinion questions at the end. So it doesn't really get too in-depth, but I take all of that. I take the data, I collect the data, I keep track of the data, and I share that with the school.
Awesome. And So did the feedback then from the students that said that they wanted, have more time with this and stuff like that, did that help to increase the programming in the school because they asked for more time?
Yeah, after this was done, I met with the school counseling office and the principal, and we discussed things that went well and what we want to improve just based on the surveys. So that is always super helpful. They were actually very shocked that they wanted more time because right after the half-day program, we kind of all wrap it up, they get pizza, and then they can go on their way. So they were surprised that they wanted more time, and the students didn't feel like they were made to go to this. They volunteered themselves to go. They wanted to go. They wanted to participate. They wanted more of this. They wanted more discussions about this. They appreciated the open layout of the organic development of the day, basically just based on what's going on in the room and presenters going with it. So we really had a lot of positive feedback from students. And I just want to offer to anybody, if anybody is looking at their own situations and their own programming and what they're doing, and they want to try to implement this, you can feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to brainstorm. I'd be happy to see if we can develop this or incorporate this maybe even to younger grades or age groups that would be more condensed, or maybe having discussions, or if anybody in the schools, you mentioned this, that I'm doing this, and they're interested to see how this is working. I have data to show them. I don't mind talking to anybody about what this looks like and how this works.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. We appreciate it. It looks like we have another question. This one says, politics can get in the way in sex education, put in quotes, in certain states. Was there any pushback from teachers or parents? I know you had mentioned, Sarah, that the administration was particularly supportive of doing this, but any other pushback you've gotten?
No. We are very fortunate in our community to have so much support. And not with this presentation, but in other presentations when I've done like the teen dating violence specifically, we didn't have anybody opt out, but we actually had parents attend to see the information that we're giving to the students, and they wanted to participate for that day. So like in our community, we haven't had that, and I know that a lot of communities and towns and schools are having that struggle. And I think a lot of it is the unknown, the fear, what is this, what content's being covered. I just go at it with the approach of being completely open. This is what we're going to talk about. Does anybody have a problem with this? We can change this. We can go at this at a different angle. What works for you? I use a lot of things that have been accomplished in other states. I know that Aaron's Law has been used and is implemented in other states. That's a really great resource. The EAAA curriculum that I referenced, I looked at that as a guide for this particular half-day presentation workshop day. So just using what's already there, what's already created, not recreating the wheel so that people can visually see that it's being done in other areas, I think that definitely helps.
All right, well, great. And just a quick note, I know there's been a couple of questions about evaluation and things like that. Just so folks know, we do have an evaluation coordinator here at WCASA. Her name is Megan Murray, and if you're interested in some support around creating your own surveys or finding a good standardized measure for evaluating your program, she's a really great person to contact about that. So I'm not seeing any other questions, Sarah, so do you have any last comments before we turn it over?
No, just that if anybody who's watching, if they want to contact me, there's my phone number right there. So feel free to do that whenever you want to.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Then we will go ahead and turn it over to Eileen. Just so you guys know, if you do come up with any more questions for Sarah, we will have a little bit of time at the end for an extra Q&A. So don't feel like you can't ask any more questions of Sarah because you can. Yeah, so I guess we'll go ahead and turn it over to Eileen Zeiger of the Rape Crisis Center in Dane County.
All right, hi, thanks for having us. Thanks, WCASA, for organizing this. Okay. So I'm going to talk about 3 programs that Rape Crisis Center runs. And I think these 3 will be really good examples to share because the audiences vary quite a bit in terms of just sort of who they are, how they're affected by gender socialization and rape culture, but also sort of how, maybe where they are in their understanding of gender socialization. So maybe some people start a little bit further along or need a little bit of catch up on exactly what it is. So I'll talk about how we address it with each of those 3. And so with each group, I'll talk about who the audience is, why it's important that we talk about gender socialization with that particular group, how we talk about it, so some of the activities and ways that we address it, and then some of the tools that we give them or hope that they walk away with for addressing gender socialization in their different contexts. And again, I just want to reiterate, if anybody has any questions about any of the programs or anything I'm saying, feel free to type it in the chat, and I will be happy to answer. So for GameChangers, GameChangers is Rape Crisis Center's Youth Advisory Board. They are 16 high school students from throughout Dane County, so it's a really nice group of kids who have, you know, some of them are in Madison, some of them are in Deerfield. We've got students from Sun Prairie and Oregon, Wanakee, like somebody who's actually sort of technically outside of the county borders, but we get people from sort of a variety of experiences in their home schools. So we actually do have students who are coming from schools where they've tried to do something regarding gender sexualization or addressing rape culture, and they themselves have gotten pushback. So we have a little bit of experience helping them think about how they could maybe address things they want to address with administrators who are less than eager to help, I guess I should say. So with the GameChangers, we talk about gender socialization with them because their core mission is to dismantle rape culture in their communities. We work with 4 social norms that are contributing to rape culture. So we work with rigid gender roles, acceptance of violence over systemically oppressed groups, culture of hypersexualization, and misconceptions of consent and sexual entitlement. And so I think those are all really great because they're actually all, we talk about them separately, but they're actually all really interrelated as they are with other systems of oppression, you know, as being a part of what makes up rape culture in an environment where we normalize violence, especially violence against women and people of color. And they really are, you know, the root cause of sexual violence. And so it's so important that we talk about gender socialization because if we want to do anything about sexual violence, we really have to understand the role of gender socialization as contributing to sexual violence. So actually, as I was going through this, making this PowerPoint, I kind of realized that all 3 of our programs, the way or how we talk about gender socialization really actually is participant-led. So when I'm thinking about it being youth-led as far as GameChangers, the way that we structure the year, so I should say that the 16 high school students work with us over the course of the school year. They meet with us twice a month, and the first quarter of the year is them doing research on the 4 social norms. So they're broken into 4 groups, and they each address one of the social norms. The second quarter, they prepare for a policy summit. So they actually reorganize their groups. They've got members of each one, and then we address gender socialization in one of those groups to present at our policy summit. And our policy summit was held at the Central Library in Madison, and we invited a range of policymakers at different levels. So we had, we had state legislators, but we also had principals and teachers and WCASA staff, thank you. And the high schoolers got the chance to present their research and present the reasons they think that policymakers and administrators need to be addressing gender socialization if they want to take seriously their efforts to support survivors and dismantle rape culture in their positions. And then the last half of the school year, after the policy summit, the GameChangers got into smaller groups to work on final projects. And so their final projects, which are informed by all 4 social norms, including gender socialization, they did a podcast, they're doing an art show, and then this picture right here is the presentation group going to present at the Capitol. And so they have Representatives Therese Brousseau and Melissa Sargent who sat in the room and took pictures with them afterwards. And so what the GameChangers sort of leave with after all of this work, I think it's exciting because it's not just the effect that they've had in the research that they've done, the presentations they've already done in the final projects, but they actually come away with tools in themselves to be able to continue conversations and work on issues of gender socialization and infuse it in sort of the other projects that they take on. All of these GameChangers are really, they're dedicated to GameChangers, but they're in so many different other things, and so the skills that they get to talk about gender socialization, they bring it and infuse it in sort of the other activities they do, sports, student government, their other volunteer work. So over the course of the year, they get presentation skills and communication skills with which to present to large audiences, but also how to have conversations about gender socialization with people who aren't really on board yet, and how to have those difficult conversations and move people a little further along in their understanding without totally losing their cool themselves, which is something I think we all work on. Through GameChangers, they have sort of a better understanding of their political efficacy. The policy summit is something that they have all, cited as kind of one of the more meaningful things that they've done this year. Just recognizing that they have access to people who make decisions, and that that they, as people who are affected, as the GameChangers are people who are affected by these rigid gender roles and gender socialization, their voices are often, taken more seriously. Like they have the power to go and talk to policymakers and principals and say, look, I'm affected by this issue. This is how I understand it. What can we do about it? And that's a lot more powerful than somebody coming in and saying, hey, I think this needs to change, but I'm not directly affected necessarily. So I think having that understanding and reinforcement of their own political efficacy has been a really important tool that they're going to leave with. In addition to sort of, it's hard to talk about an issue that you maybe feel very deeply but don't necessarily have the language to describe to others. So one of the things that they've gotten over the course of GameChangers is the opportunity to use and learn new language and have more information about the issues that they care about, and so and the opportunity to practice that in a supportive environment. And then finally, the last thing is having a support system where they know that there are other people who are also thinking about issues of gender socialization and how it affects rape culture, and that when they're off in their communities talking about these things, they might be the only voice there, but they know that there are 15 other GameChangers and organizations in the county that are there to back them up and that they have had conversations with and that are very supportive of them. So that, I think, those tools really just sort of give GameChangers the feelings of self-confidence and empowerment to be able to talk more about gender socialization as it relates to sexual violence. This is the last slide for GameChangers. Does anyone have any questions about this program or how we talk about gender socialization? Okay.
I'm not seeing any questions right now, Eileen. Yeah, so go ahead and move along. But if we get any that come in, I'll let you know.
Great. Okay, so the second program I'd like to talk about is our Safer Bar program. So the audience is front of house staff at bars and restaurants in Dane County. So far, we've mostly trained bar staff, and it's actually been really a great experience to talk with them about how they are affected. I mean, I used to work at a restaurant, but it's been a while, and it's exciting to have them be really invested in making their establishments inviting and welcoming to all people. And so it's been a really heartening experience to talk with them about how they can think about the ways that they can be part of keeping people safe from sexual violence. So the reason that we talk about gender socialization specifically when we talk about Safer Bar is a couple of reasons. One, I think gender socialization is really something important for them to know in order to even just recognize that there's a problem in general. We get a lot of questions about, like, well, isn't it just awkward flirting? And shouldn't we just, be kind to the person who is, maybe not good at flirting? And I think talking about gender socialization really can be eye-opening, especially for that situation where we're thinking, it's not the person who's awkward is worth often, thinking about saving the feelings of a male patron at the expense of another patron. And so I think understanding gender socialization can help front of house staff be on board with the fact that, these behaviors are problematic, and not only do they limit the positive experience of patrons, but they're also contributing to sexual violence. And so anyway, so gender socialization is important for the recognition of the problem. I think it's also important for them to know how it contributes to how it relates to the solutions that we provide, like the ways that we want them to intervene, ways that we want them to look at even just recognizing problematic situations or problematic behaviors in the first place. And I think gender socialization is also really important when thinking about the empathy that they have for patrons. Restaurant staff are, if they've been doing it for a while and they're good at their job, it's because they have a lot of empathy and because they want people to have a really excellent time, and because they're also good at reading people. And so, we want to value that and then sort of add the piece of, there are people who are in relationships that maybe you haven't been in, or they have life experiences that you don't have, and how can you extend your empathy to people who maybe identify differently than you or have different lived experiences than you. And so the way that we talk about it, and I have a couple of slides sort of visually showing you how we talk about it, but we begin with visual representations. I think that is just a really striking way to show the difference between the way we think about boys and girls, women and men. And then we make it relevant to the context. So, having there be a difference between the way men are presented and the way women are presented wouldn't be an issue unless we set, values for each of those things or limitations for each of those things. And so we talk about, what values and what limitations are relevant in that context, in the bar or restaurant context, so they can kind of see how gender socialization might affect their patrons. And then we extrapolate that to point out problematic behaviors that might come as a result of those rigid gender roles. And I'll come back to these glasses in a second. So this is a slide that we use in our Safer Bar training. We sort of talk about, we lead up to it with a little bit more of a discussion of, sort of gender socialization, but these are the images that we show. Pretty stark contrast. And then at this point, actually, for the very first one that we did, I actually learned a lot about how I could present this in the future, because I had these images up, and I said, okay, tell me a little bit about, what is being portrayed for boys, strength, masculinity, and what is being portrayed for girls. What does femininity look like here? Shopping, white skin, thin. And then the conversation actually moved on to, this is sort of what I mean by participant-led, where they brought up the difference between drinks that masculine people order and feminine people order. And they got very excited. It was very fun. They went and grabbed the drinks. They're like, I will show you what the drinks come in. And so the rocks glass on the left is what men's drinks come in, and the quote-unquote men's drinks come in. The cocktail glass on the right are what quote-unquote women's drinks come in. And then we had this really interesting conversation about how people order drinks and their reactions when the drink looks different than what they think that they ordered. They, reported having people send drinks back or ask to have them put in a different glass, even though they wanted the same drink, just in a different shaped glass. And sort of, we also talked about the actual alcohols, like the idea of a masculine liquor is dark browns or very strong, and the idea of like a feminine drink is lighter colored liquors and fruity. And then from that, we extrapolated sort of what those problematic behaviors could be from that perspective. And so we talked about people ordering the drinks in the rocks glass, feeling like they need to be in control, about needing to seem strong, able to hold their liquor, and then people ordering cocktail drinks, wanting to seem sweet or available or sugary, I guess. And then I drew the connection to actually the literal shape of the glasses. How, if you were drawing a cartoon, superhero, you might even use these shapes as a baseline for the outlines of bodies, of literal bodies. And so that was a really interesting conversation. And then we brought on, so the, taking that idea of, who's getting what drink, that kind of thing. If there's a difference between who's ordering drinks, that's not really necessarily a problem unless we start adding values, expectations, and limitations to that. And so taking that conversation to connect it to rape culture and look at sort of what do we think about who's entitled to what in terms of interactions at a bar or interactions at a party where alcohol is involved. This ad I like using because it's such a blatant example of rape culture, and it's a pretty recent ad. It's from 2015, and then we have the conversation about tell me what the woman is doing, tell me what the man is doing. Does she look like she's aware of that her eggnog has been spiked? Does he look like he's going to tell her? So we have I sort of elicit those kinds of responses from the audience as we're looking at how gender socialization affects bar culture. And so the tools that we hope the front of house staff and bar staff will leave with is the ability to recognize problematic behaviors in a variety of relationships. So we talked a lot about, you know, what problematic behavior looks like in different contexts. So, you know, how to recognize coercion in a same-sex relationship, or we did also talk a little bit about, you know, domestic violence and how that differs from what you might do, how you might step in. We did this by doing a lot of role plays on how to intervene, and they had a lot of really good advice to begin with, but then they also, we also kind of talked a little bit about how gender socialization plays into even the ways that they intervene, or even the ways that they support coworkers. And so it was a really interesting conversation to have about how can we be really mindful of the ways that we intervene and not reinforcing those sort of gender socialization problems that affect rape culture. Any questions about our Safer Bar program? Okay.
While I'm going to wait and see if maybe, Eileen, if a couple of people type anything, but I just wanted to say I'm so glad that you brought up the glasses story, because I remember talking about that with you, and that was so fascinating. It is really interesting. I do actually kind of have a question, because I know we sort of had talked about male patrons specifically sending it back and asking for the rocks glass instead of like the daiquiri glass. And so I was just wondering, were there any women who sent back their drink? Did they mention that women wanted the quote-unquote feminine glass?
No, you know, they didn't mention women sending drinks back, and I think that's an interesting question, actually, because that kind of really gets at gender socialization in a couple of different ways. One, I think, you know, women aren't socialized to sort of really request what they want, so even the act of sending it back might be kind of uncomfortable for somebody who's been socialized not to do that. But I also think that it's interesting, because when we're thinking about the role of power in these things, and where we think of, even just here, I'll go back to what those glasses look like. You know, if you're thinking about power, even just looking at just these physical glasses, like which glass looks more like it's going to shatter if you drop it, or which glass looks more likely to tip over if you bump it, right? And if you're thinking about that as a proxy for power, I think we might agree that the rocks glass, you know, and as far as glasses have power, has more power. But so I think that direction of what is okay is really, you know, one directional. Like, it's more okay, I think, for women to have things that are powerful, or to aspire to things that are powerful, even if we just look at clothing, you know. So I think that that actually might say something else even about how women are might try to portray themselves if they are very insistent on having a rocks glass. But I don't think that they actually do send drinks back often and have it requested. That's not what we didn't get that feedback at Safer Bar, but
sure. Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering. We did have a couple of questions come in.
Sure.
Somebody is wondering what bars do the Safer Bar program, and how is it advertised?
Yeah. Oh, very good question. So far we've only done it in 3 places. We piloted it at Madison Blind about a year ago. We've recently done it with Gibbs, but the way that was structured, actually, it was so Gibbs is on Willie Street, connected to Grandpa's Pizza. They actually invited bartenders from, so bar managers from other places. So we ended up training people from Fieldhouse and Tornado Room and a couple of other places, and some bartenders that also worked at Gibbs and Merchant. Merchant is another mainly bar, but also restaurant. And then what we did later was we actually connected with a group called Spirited Women, which is, I think it's statewide, but it's like a guild of women bartenders, which it's pretty amazing. And they got together to sort of, I think it's bartenders, but also liquor purveyors, so they make liquor. And so they got together to sort of offer training opportunities for other women bartenders and just sort of have that support system for themselves. And that's really exciting because the way we structured it before was that the bar would provide us the space and 4 hours to train their entire staff. And we wanted, in order to be Safer Bar certified, we wanted them to have 80% of their front of house staff certified. And that structure we found was really difficult. It's, they have to pay their staff a lot more per hour if they're not getting tips. 4 hours is a lot to ask. And then we also, needed to cover costs of training. So that has actually been kind of made it difficult for us to bring this to a lot of different bars. And the way that we're trying to restructure it right now is we're actually thinking about offering it more like we offer our Chimera classes, which is our next program that I'll talk about, where we have individuals sign up for the class and get certified individuals. And then, I think we're going to be trying to market it differently by having bars say, you're hired, we want you to attend this training. And maybe we're not sure about some of the logistics about that, but we think that's going to be a more effective way to get more people, more individuals in the restaurant field trained. So if that answers everyone's question.
Yeah, and I guess in addition to how it's being advertised to bars as a program for them, how is it being advertised to the public, or for example, like university students in the area? Are they finding out like which bars are receiving this sort of training?
Not yet, because I feel like it's not as robust as it could be, and so it's we're sort of working on how we can make it a little bit stronger before. What our ultimate goal is that bars are known, and they have like a little very basically just like a little window cling so that they are identified as a safer bar. And so we're hoping to get that that message out as we're able to train more people. Right now our capacity isn't big enough to have that really become like a citywide or countywide phenomenon, but that is our ultimate goal. So if anybody on the phone wants to, or on the call wants to help with our marketing, we would love it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Eileen. I don't think we have any other questions right now, so feel free to forge ahead.
Okay. All right. So then our last program is our Chimera Self-Defense, Empowerment Self-Defense class. The audience for this is primarily women and girls, but we also don't limit it. We say women and girls because we're thinking specifically about gender socialization. So it's really, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, but we're mainly targeting this class for people who've been socialized to be more passive or more concerned with not hurting people's feelings. And so that can look like a variety of different people. And so we don't limit it to women and girls, but that is our primary audience. We also offer a class for trans women. Trans women are welcome in any of our classes, but we also think it's important to offer a specific class that they can attend and get specified tools. Oh, I should say the age, it's 12 plus. So we talk about gender socialization in the Chimera context because it primarily, the important thing for this is that it affects communication and how comfortable people are sort of asserting themselves in different situations, in different scenarios. So it could be, how comfortable people feel asserting their personal space on a bus, or how comfortable they feel being really sort of straightforward and assertive at a work meeting. And we know that that gender socialization contributes to rape culture, and Chimera is all about giving people the tools to sort of not just feel comfortable or feel like they can keep themselves safe, but it's really about a culture shift where where we're working on changing the environment so that it's not one of passivity of one one person over the other. We talk about gender socialization in terms of communication styles. So we highlight aggressiveness, passivity, and assertiveness, and we give examples of each one of those in role plays. And we highlight the fact that assertiveness is really the way to go. It's it's clear. It's not. It shouldn't be considered rude, but we do highlight the fact that it might be considered rude, just being sort of straightforward about things. If you've been socialized as a woman, because we talk a lot about how people are often, like children and women are often socialized to put others before themselves and to sort of tamper down their own intuition and feelings of insecurity, physical or emotional insecurity, to protect the feelings of somebody else. So we really talk about how to be able to assert your own physical and emotional safety and well-being, and I'm really putting that above somebody else's potential hurt feelings. I'm kind of running out of time and I'm going over, so I'll just kind of quickly go through. We talk a little bit about trusting your instincts, about how intuition is maybe seen as less formal as a gut feeling, and kind of how we gender those two ideas. And then at the end, the tools that people walk away with are kind of similar to the ways that we talk about how we talk about gender socialization. So people walk away with having spent some time practicing being assertive. We do have some physical moves too, because I think people appreciate that, but we really highlight assertive communication. So an example of that, one of the success stories that really stuck with me, even when I first started volunteering with the Rape Crisis Center in 2008, one of the Chimera success stories and an example of assertive communication was a woman was on a bus in the evening, and it was a pretty empty bus, and a male patron came on and sat right next to her, even though it was a pretty empty bus, and so she wasn't too comfortable with that, but she didn't say anything. And then he put his hand on her knee. So she lifts up his hand and she yells to the bus, I just found this hand on my knee. Does anybody know who it belongs to? So that's kind of an example of some of the ways that we practice, sort of not letting people encroach on your personal space, and being comfortable with saying, like, I'm uncomfortable you sitting this close to me in the first place, and how can you sort of assert your own physical safety. One caveat, though, is we always say these are just tools. You don't have to use any of them in any situation, and it's still not your fault. And so, we make sure to make it clear that you are the expert in terms of your own personal safety, and you can use these tools if you think that they are useful, but you're in no way required to. All right, and then to wrap up, the examples I have for, or sort of my summary of how you could include gender socialization prevention work, I would say first define and explore gender socialization with the group that you're talking to. I think that WCASA Toolkit is outstanding, and I love Jesse's intro in the beginning about the intersectionality of gender socialization and how there's a lot of different ways to look at how gender socialization affects different people in different cultures and communities. Second thing is to explain and understand the relevance to your audience and also to your learning objectives. Like, how is it related to the, why are you talking about it at all? And then the final thing is just, give people tools to address this in their roles in the community. I think that's really the key, because then, you've really kind of diffused this from being not just the classroom or the bar or, on the bus, but you're giving people tools to have conversations with people, throughout their day. And so that kind of really can diffuse the work of that you're trying to accomplish. Thank you.
really appreciate you going into details about these several different audiences that you do this work with. So while I wait just to see if anyone has any other questions, please all feel free to start typing in any last questions or comments or thoughts that you have regarding this. But while folks are doing that, I'll just remind you that we will send out the slides and the recording of this webinar to all the attendees, and the webinar will be archived on our website. And we'll send out links to some of these resources that have been shared and the videos and things that have been shared during the course of the webinar as well. I'm not seeing any questions come in, so while we're waiting, do either Eileen or Sarah, do you have any last thoughts either to share?
I would just like to say, thank you to everybody who's taken the time out of their day to think about how they can include gender socialization into their prevention work. It's so important, and I'm sure you all are already doing it in some way, and just making that explicit is, as I think, can be really powerful when you're trying to explain why it's important to the people that you're working with. Because, depending on the audience that you're working with, some people might not really see the value in discussing gender and the way we're socialized. And so I'm just so happy that everybody's on listening and trying to figure out how they can do that work better. So thank you.
We do have one person who said this is a really great webinar. I'm very appreciative of both speakers. So thank you to Sarah and Eileen, both of you. And if folks have resources to share, please also send them to the prevention listserv. So just a reminder that we do have a prevention listserv, and as you have any resources that are coming up, if you just feel like sharing them, it's more than just, the listserv is more, is there for more than just asking questions and looking for resources. It's also just to share, just because you found something great. So please remember to continue to use that as a resource as well. I don't see any other questions coming in, so we are going to end exactly on time at 11:30 a.m. I'm very impressed with us. Way to go, folks. So thank you again to both Sarah and Eileen. I really appreciate both of you sharing, how this shows up in your work, and, being really detailed about how you're involving gender socialization in your prevention work. And just a reminder for folks, our next prevention webinar will be in 2 weeks. On June 29th. So we look forward to seeing a lot of you back at that time. So thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thanks.